Good afternoon. I'm going to make this a little bit interactive, hopefully wake you up before lunch. I always end up with a graveyard slot, either before lunch, when everyone wants to leave, and I saw loads get up just now and go, or after lunch, when everyone's falling asleep. So that's what I live with. So my name's Moyse. I'm the EMEA Channel Director at Webroot. I've been in IT a long time. I like to say I look younger than the age. That is an old picture, by the way. I'm still getting away with. I've been in cloud services and selling cloud services for 6, coming on 7 years. I sit on the board of EuroCloud, and I also sit on the governance board, who kind of mentioned a second ago, from the Cloud Industry Forum, and I'll touch on that briefly later. Webroot is a vendor. We are a cloud vendor. We've just launched some more cloud services this week, Secure Anywhere, a new revolutionary antivirus product. So we understand some of the stuff. Now, I'll give you one warning from this. I searched on the internet quickly when I was putting this slide together, warts and all. I want to tell you how it is. I'm going to give you some of the bad and indifferent, to be quite honest. Don't search in Google Images for warts, because I hadn't eaten anything this morning now, and you wouldn't want lunch. This was the mildest picture I could find. So hopefully I'm going to give you some stuff which is a fairly honest feedback. I sat on a round table on Wednesday at another event with a number of CSOs talking about cloud in a workshop type event. And it was interesting, and I'll share some of that feedback for you, what they assumed vendors should answer, and they didn't understand sometimes why it's not as easy as it should be. So, cloud's hyped. We're all here. Everything has got cloud on it now, whether you define and agree it is or not. Every vendor's jumped on that bandwagon and put cloud word on it because it's how you make money, and you can market it as cloud. So you have to disseminate between the different types of cloud services, because the same questions don't apply to all. The same, I had contract negotiations just now, don't necessarily treat all with the same brush, okay? Because they're not all the same, and sometimes you don't need that diligence. You need to decide where to apply that. So I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you already have cloud services in use for your business? I haven't finished the rest of the question yet. With business critical data stored up in the cloud? See, now your hand didn't go up. Okay. How many of you use cloud services for other things where you consider it safer? Okay. And how many of you are looking at moving to the cloud, and that's why you're here to figure out where the baseline is? Okay, so about a mix of a third. Okay. So what we've seen, some of the things that have changed out there, is cloud seems to be being pushed a lot and sold to the business owners. I'm seeing if there's any nods there. It isn't always selling to IT, where traditionally sales have been made around technology to fix a problem. And the challenge you'll have is potentially your MD, financial director, whatever it be, will be at some forum like this in their arena, and hear from someone else what they've just done, and it was cloud, and it's saved this money. And these are all the typical things I'm sure you hear. It's going to save you money, it's faster, it's quicker, you can just switch it on. It's all the golden chalice, everything's perfect. And they're going to come back and say, why aren't we doing this? Go and get this done, because I want what they've got. But there's some underlying things that you take responsibility for, of course, which is we're going to touch on here, is security and the implications of making that change. So I could pull out tons of studies. This was a simple one, but they all pretty much show the same. There is concerns over cloud, which is understandable because it's different. You could argue whether it's new or not, but it is moving very, very quickly, and there's a lot of things different than deploying your own solutions. But if you add these figures up, 45% of the concern in this study was around the data and the security of where that is, what people can access. And that always comes up as the number one. Any of the studies you pick up, number one concern on cloud is always security. Number two tends to come out as reliability, because you're not in control of it anymore. So some of the criteria you can look at when you're evaluating cloud suppliers. And I'm not going to be prescriptive and say this is exactly it, and if you come thinking I'm going to give you, here's the top 10 questions to ask. I got asked this in the workshop the other day. What question should we all be asking you as a vendor that's the killer question? There isn't just one. It will vary depending on the vendor, depending on the country you're in, and what you're trying to achieve with the technology. The challenge is, if you ask about standard, what standards do you have as a cloud vendor? Well, there's ISO, there's SaaS, but there's two types, and do you know the difference? Cloud Industry Forum was mentioned. I'll touch on the benefit that has. Cloud Consortium, misspelt, I noticed this morning, apologies. Cloud Management Working Group, Cloud Federation, there's hundreds of these groups. Which one do you listen to? There isn't a prescriptive one you can go to that helps me, makes it simple. Tier 1, Tier 4 data centers, that gets bandied around. How many in here, and be honest, I might not get an answer here, how many in here think the Tier 1 is the best data center? That's either my assumption is wrong from what I've heard from customers, or no one wants to stick their hand up. We have a lot of people assume when they're pitched tier 1, that is the top tier. It's not. Tier 4 is. But you need tier 4. Tier 1's still good. So you need to balance these things out. What you're going to get in here around cloud is a lot of hype and a lot of, well, we've got ISO, and we've got this, and we've got that. Doesn't necessarily mean that's a good cloud vendor for you, for the business application you want, and the contractual terms and the penalties and the security is going to be right. It's an indicator. But we see this sometimes. We'll see an RFP. Here's a tick list. If you can tick these, you're in. What about all the other questions you're not asking us? Privacy, I heard that being mentioned. I think you may have covered some of that, so I'm not going to go around thoroughly through that. But you need to know where your data is going, all the usual data regulation rules. But not just for the UK. How many of you have offices in other countries in Europe? A few. Sweden rules are different, particularly central government rules around where they have data. It was mentioned a second ago, there's been some changes. Germany, the workers' union, absolutely what you can look at and what you can share. So you need to consider that in choosing a cloud solution. Because typically cloud is rolled out across an organization. Compliance, depending which market you're in, SOX, HIPAA, US ones if you're part of a US company. But it can also be business-specific rules. Something maybe your CEO or HR has said, this must happen, or this is how we act. Does the cloud that you're choosing impact or change this? Now, one of the things you are going to find, and I heard mentioned as I came in the back end of the other presentation, is you're going to get legal involved because cloud, and I've come from the software world a few years ago, big time in the software world, then into cloud. And one of the big differences I've seen is, in the software world, I didn't get people asking about contract terms. It's a click-through. In cloud, you get into really long, prolonged, well, what does this mean? And can we change this? By customer after customer. Now, a couple of things there. One is understand on the vendor side, that makes it difficult. Because if we're signing up 2,000 customers a month, that's the nature of cloud, is to fastly accelerate adoption. How we handle it if all 2,000 say, I want slight changes? So there's two sides to the coin there. It isn't always the cloud vendor being reticent to support and work with you, but it's sometimes unfeasible to support that many changes, because we haven't had it in the software world. The other thing is, do your legal team understand this? There needs to be, and there are some sessions out there, legal people attending these sort of sessions. Is there anyone legal in the room apart from the presenter? You know, there's a lack of understanding, and hopefully you'll support this, within legal sector. We get contracts come back and people have put a whole batch of 2P rules in there, 3 pages of how we're going to take over their employees, because they think it's an outsourcing contract. Because no one's made them aware of what this new cloud world is and how the rules have changed. So there's a whole challenge there, which is on your side as well. Now, the piece here, what questions to ask? And this is what I got asked the other day. Well, what questions should we be asking cloud vendors? You can go on the web and search, and you'll find lots of different lists. And there'll be, here's the top 150 to ask your cloud vendor. Well, one is, if they give you the answers, you can understand them. Because getting answers means nothing unless you can interpret them. 2 is, are they going to answer? Which is why I put this at the bottom. And that's what I explained to the audience the other day. It's not always easy. It's not always a reticence. But what cloud vendors will do, this is the warts and all, in genuine honesty, is if you're a 30-user customer asking for us to do 40 answers and then contract changes, cloud vendors are going to make a judgment and say, do you know what, I'm afraid you can use the service or you can't. It's going to be a weighing up of how much effort it's going to take of customization to win a customer who wants to buy this for $800, whatever. If you're 50,000 seats, you're going to get all the help in the world because the effort's worth it. That's the reality of what's going on in the cloud world. You can't custom cut everything for every customer, and you don't want it custom cut in contracts. Because if you've got different contracts for every customer, how do you measure the SLAs and what you're supposed to do for each customer? It's the consistency in the cloud world that enables vendors to be secure and to be able to deliver the service and quality that you expect. And the other thing is when you get these answers, ask the next question down. Not just the surface question. Okay, and I'll give you a few examples in a second, but dig deeper. Because the surface level questions sometimes don't give the full story. SLAs, what are they? Okay, so what SLAs do they have? And are they even relevant to how you're going to use their service? They can say this, look, I've got 30 SLAs, but if only 4 of them really are applicable to what you care about, the others don't have value to you. And are they in the contract? Now, this is an interesting one. I've seen this on a number of vendors where we compete, where SLAs are on the data sheet, and they're positioned to you, and then they're not reflected. And I saw a few nods going there. Not reflected, the same in the contract. It's only the contract that's going to apply. So don't make assumptions that there's always correlation between these. There's a lot of vendors rapidly getting into cloud who've come from a product background, And they just rush at this, and these things get missed. Now, here's an important one. What's the remediation? Again, I've seen this in competitive situations where talking to clients, and we get thrown at us. But XYZ is offering us this amazing SLA. And the first reaction is, well, how can they actually deliver that? And then the question you want to ask is, well, okay, assume they don't. What's the remediation? And I've pushed customers to ask about the remediation. Because I can promise you the world, but if I fail, I just give you a Mars bar, who cares? That's the reality. Some of the SLAs, the remediation, doesn't compensate if they don't hit it. So it's a great marketing tool. We're a little bit better than them. And you can compare it because it's a nice round number to look at on a list. So don't take them at face value for what they put down on a sales piece. Next piece is, how do you even measure them? So you're going to put these things in place, these terms. This is what you want to use as a cloud service, and they're going to take all this pain away from you. Do you have the ability to measure them? What's going to happen in IT is a lot of using cloud services is going to change some focus from managing boxes and keeping things running to contract and service management between you and that vendor. Are you used to doing that? Are your legal team used to doing it? It's changing the focus in those areas. And also check what dependencies they have. A lot of vendors will back off and use third-party components or hosting services. Well, they're reliant on their SLAs. Have they reflected them in their service to you? But the key always comes down to it's about the data. You use a cloud service quite safely if you don't put any data in it. It's when you start putting personal data, personally identified data in it, that the questions really start to come. And interestingly, I did a quick snapshot of odd data centers, and there's lists on there. And it isn't just they've got a data center in a particular area. You might also want to know, well, what data center is it? What tier is it? Where is it? Because there's some real interesting ones out there. Now, you might be fine with those, but at least you know the facts going into it. So where is the data going to be held? Don't make the assumption that where they tell you there's a data center, is it where your data's going to be? Yeah, we have a UK data center. So I would guess most of you would assume, therefore, that's the one where your data will be stored. Have you asked that second question? Because not necessarily. They'll say, well, we have tons of data centers. Okay, does that have value to you? Because if you have 12 data centers, but you're only ever going to use a local one, the fact they've got 11 others is totally irrelevant to you in the UK. Sounds nice on paper. Then the case of, well, okay, so you're going to store our data, UK data center, that's great, we like this piece. And how's the data stored? Is it just isolated in one data center? People like Amazon with EC2 will stripe data across multiple centers and often around the world. So whilst your focal data center may be the UK, your backup data center or other parts of your data may be in other countries, which again, as the speaker said, was maybe fine. There's nothing to be feared, but you still need the data regulations in place. If it's in the US, have you got safe harbor in place? So it's making sure you've done the things applicable with the facts at hand. Data mingling is an interesting one. So a live case I heard about a couple of days ago from another presenter at the event I was at and I thought was interesting was a US ISP where the FBI came into them. So we've got this company's committed fraud. We want the boxes with the data on because you're hosting all the stuff for them. They went, well, it's that one, 5 boxes or so. But other customer data's mingled across them. That's fine, we're taking them. And they took all of them. So does the provider have the ability, if they have something put upon them in that way, to segment your data, or are they going to lose your data because of someone else's fault? Now, these aren't rocket science questions, and some of you may be sitting there and hopefully not going, I would have asked those anyway. But we don't get asked them. We've got over 7,000 cloud customers, and we get some who ask an immense amount. Often they're a 15-user company. And then we get some really large companies where we're actually shocked at, okay, shouldn't they be, we're sort of thinking, you should be asking us these, ask us these, and they don't. So we see a total mix of people's understanding of cloud. And of course, then you've got the compliance regulations, whether it be in your vertical, if you're in medical, there'll be certain data regulations, in the government in the UK with the central, et cetera, in the health industry. How does that cloud affect that? And it may be you're going to need to go for private cloud in some instances just because of the nature of the data you hold and the way you need to work and regulations you need to comply with. And that's supposed to be telling me if I've got 30 minutes to go and I can't see anything on it, so I'll keep going until someone waves 5 minutes at me. Data access. Where's the data affected? Where's it put into the cloud? Where Where is the data I've mentioned? Does it matter? And does it matter for that data? So for example, let me ask, those who are using cloud services now, how many are doing email filtering as a cloud service? Okay, a few. Do you really care about what data is stored and who has access to it in that instance? Because the data that's going through that service is already going out to the internet through your ISP anyway. So the questions you're going to ask of that sort of vendor may not be of the same concern if you're moving your HR system out or you're moving your CRM system data out, which currently is all internally. So you need to get the balance of, well, what is different about the two and not treat all cloud services as blatantly the same questions. How do you get the data in the first place? So if it's a CRM system, is it you start from scratch? Do you have to upload it? Do you send them data? And if you send it, what's the security of the medium? Because that's nothing to do with the cloud service. That's how you get it to them and how it's getting uploaded and who has access to it in that transit period before it's in their safe data center. And here's another interesting one to ask. Who has access to my data? Not of your own staff, but who has access from the provider to your data? How many people? Where are they located? What has the vendor done to vet the people that have access to your system? Because the biggest security issue, I'm sure you all know, is always people. So great, the data centers are all secure. Their people have to have access to maintain and monitor and run these cloud services. What data access do they have to your corporate data, and who? Is it limited, or is it wide open that there's 500 people in their company across 10 countries that can access everything? Who owns the data? Now, all of these things should be covered in the legal contract from any good cloud vendor. You're going to find the stuff's in there, and your legal team can just tick out and go, yes, the right things are in there, the right jurisdictions are in place. But don't assume that's there. And how do you get the data back should you decide to leave the service? Has anyone left a cloud service? Well, that's good signs. Not one hand, okay. You've got to think about how it's easy to get on them, switch it on, the service is up and running quickly, you've got a vanilla version, off you go. But is it as easy to decommission if you want to move and change? And how do you get the data back? And what format does the data come back in is another question. Don't assume that the format you give them to put it in is the same format it comes back in. So here's one that I think is quite often missed around the security of cloud services. So think about passwords, just entering passwords. How many of you have had whether it's your own personal using a site or whether it's your work application, your passwords run out, you need to change it, and it won't let you use one of the last 28 passwords? And yeah, hands? No one? Just me? Okay. And you try and use one that's sort of similar that you can remember. So you append an A to it or you do something, but then it gets messy on the next one. And that's the life we live in. So how many of you have got single sign-on or have worked towards that over the years for internal systems? Tell me someone, because I was talking about this 15 years ago. So a lot of people have been working towards with a group policy, with Active Directory. The world's moved towards trying to do that authentication. Once you're on your network, things work. Now you introduce cloud services, you need to consider, what about the authentication? We'll assume HTTPS by default, but now you've got web application sites. How does that link into your Active Directory? So just to give you an example, okay, you've got your domain password login, great, that's fine for everything internally, but suddenly you go, whether it's Salesforce, NetSuite, Siebel, you've got a CRM system. That's external. They've got a password type format to use. HR system. And I've worked in many major corporates where vendors, where this is the scenario. Where you've got 5 or 6, 7 different systems, all with different types of format. One's needs a 10-digit password. One will take 6, one will take 8. And the 8 one you've used on one won't work on another because they say it's not secure enough. So you end up with, I'd like to use one password, or is that not good or bad? But you end up with this mix. So of course that leads to what we all know, and in reality what happens. So as you start adding cloud services in, you've got to think about the basics again. What are you going to do about authentication to these services? And you take it one step further. How many of you in the room, so use the question this way, how many of you get your email to more than one device? Keep the hands up, keep the hands up. How many get it to more than 2? Okay, more than 3? Okay, more than 4? Anyone left? Okay, I got to 5 on Wednesday when I did this. But that's the reality. In IT, typically 3 seems to be the average. In the consumer, and when I talk to end users at different events, it tends to be the end user, not the IT departments. It tends to be maybe 2, often just bulging into 3. But that's the reality. They're going to bring, I know consumerization is an overhyped word as well, they're going to bring their own devices. Now, you've put a cloud application in place, pick Salesforce. They're going to access it from an iPad. They don't have to access the corporate network. There's no protection onto you. They can now access your corporate applications for any device, which is great for mobility and use, but has that got a security implication to you? So there's a whole other arena this leads into that you need to consider in moving to cloud. Not negating cloud. It's a strong value proposition. If you do it with diligence and in the right way, you can get the benefits. Of course, if you put security in the hands of the users, we know where we end up. They go mobile, they use their own devices, unsecure Wi-Fi, etc. That all applies to cloud. So Gartner published something a couple of years ago which might be useful. I'm not going to read through this, but they gave what cloud consumer rights should be. And they're pretty much what I've just touched on, and I think that's part of the last presentation was touching on. Pretty basic stuff. That's what you should be questioning your cloud vendors on. And questions around them. And there should be openness between you as a customer or potential customer and us as a cloud vendor. Now, there's a lot of other stuff I was asked to cover, and I looked at this and thought, you know what, I've got 30 minutes. I didn't know you'd be overrunning just before lunch. A lot of this applies down to the contractuals and your legal team. And I would heavily emphasize, if you move into cloud services, engage with your legal team and make sure they understand it, because you're going to rely on them heavily with a lot of the terms. Because a lot of stuff in these contracts is, the fly come up, is difficult to understand. I look at them when I'm talking to a client and put it back to the legal teams and let them, I can't tell you if that means this or not. And that's what you're going to find in the cloud salespeople you deal with. They're not going to understand a lot of those terms either. You're also going to find a lot of the cloud salesmen, they're not going to help you through all this, and they don't understand it because they've come from product backgrounds. So they're learning as well. I'm still learning. I've been in cloud 6 years. Okay? The industry's still learning. It's changing so rapidly. Now, the Cloud Industry Forum was mentioned. I sit on the board of the Cloud Industry Forum and the governance board, but representing not Webroot, but Eurocloud. So I represent one group on the other. And what this has been formed for, and I would recommend you go to this site. It's free to get information. You can become a member and therefore take part in user groups and contribute to pieces. But it's really a brokering between you as an end potential customer and the vendors to try and bring some consistency. The edict of the Cloud Industry Forum, when it was founded, was what we want to do is encourage cloud usage in a safe and open manner. So encourage vendors to deliver openness about the things you need to know, and encourage and provide you information to know what to ask with some consistency. Because wouldn't it be great if you all knew, if you asked this set of questions, I could give them to you right now, because I knew that that's the format that we're going to come in, so we've got a prepared answer, we can give you depth of answer. Because that's not the first time I've had them phrased that way. I haven't got to try and interpret what you mean, and that's going to take me 3 weeks to figure out on every customer. So this is to try and broker that. There's no 3 minutes. I'm going to finish. Don't worry. So vendors are going through certification of this. Some major vendors have signed up. One's about to be announced this week, so I'm not going to say it just in case it hasn't been announced yet. Are signing up to contribute and take part. We hold a lot of the events at Microsoft. But it's not a vendor club. It's for you, the customer, so that we as vendors, if you become certified, have said, we're going to be open about all this information, and we're going to do it in a consistent format. So if you get it from 3 different vendors who are members, it's going to look similar. So you can actually compare it rather than have 12 different versions that you now have to interpret. So it's the beginning. It's been going a year. We're just getting to the first certifications. It's taken a lot of work. There's a lot of Cloud Security Alliance and other groups involved with this, lawyers, etc. There's a lot of contributory factors, including there are end users on the board. So if any of you are heavily into cloud, or as you progress through and take part, the board cycles its members. So we will consistently look for replacement members of all parts, including myself. Okay. So I'll leave you with 3 minutes to go. I would suggest you need to be asking the questions now before the questions are asked of you. Because there are going to be some people who get cloud wrong. There are already some who have done it. Okay? And you can avoid a lot of those pitfalls in rocket science by just doing some of the basic diligence and asking the questions. Are there any particular questions? You've got 1 minute before Emma drags me off the stage. Is there anything anyone wants to ask? If not, I'll be outside with the Webroot stand. They just want lunch. Cool. Thank you very much. On time. Take care.